When Kim and I were temporarily homeless and financially unstable, our emotions were out of control. Many times, what sounded logical was pure emotion talking. Our emotions were saying the same thing our friends were saying: play it safe, just get a safe, secure job, and enjoy life. Yet logical, we both agree that freedom made more sense to us than security. In going for financial freedom, we knew we could find a sense of security that job security could never give us. That made sense to us. The only thing in our way were our emotionally driving thoughts that sound logical but in the long term made no sense. The good news is that once we made it across, the old thoughts stopped screaming and the new thoughts we desire became our reality. The thoughts of the B and the I quadrant. Today I understand the emotions when a person say I can take risks. I have a family to think about. I must have a secure job. Or it takes money to make money. That is why I can't invest. Or I'll do it on my own. I feel their thoughts, for I have had those thoughts myself, but looking across the quadrant and having achieved financial freedom from the B and I quadrant, I can faithfully say that having financial freedom is much more peaceful and secure way of thinking. Difference between E and B. Core emotional values cause different point of views. The struggle in a communication between owners of a business and the employee of a business is often caused by difference in emotional values. That has always been a struggle between the E and the B because one want more pay and the other wants more work. That is why we often hear I am overworked and underpaid. And from the other side, we often hear what we can do to motivate them to work harder and be more loyal without paying them anymore. Difference between B and I. Another is the constant tension between business operators and the investors in the businesses, often called the shareholders, the B and the I. One wants more money to operate with, and the other wants a greater dividend. A conversation at the shareholders meeting may sound like this: company managers, we need a private jet or so our executive can get to their meeting faster. Investors, we need fewer executives, then we won't need a private jet. Difference between S and B. In business transaction, I have often seen a bride as such as attorney put a multi-million dollars deals together for a B business owner, and when the transaction is completed, the attorney becomes slightly disturbed because the B makes millions and the S earns an hourly wage. Their words may sound like this: attorney, we did all the work and we made all the money. The B. How many hours did those guys bill for us? We could have bought the whole law firm for what they charge us. Difference between E and I. Another example is a bank manager who gives an investor a loan to buy some real estate. The investor makes hundreds of thousands of dollars tax free, and the bankers get a paycheck that are tax heavily. That would be an example of an E dealing with the I that often cause a mild emotional reaction. The E might say, I give the guys a loan and he doesn't even say thank you. I don't think he knows how hard we work for him. The I might say, boy, those guys are picky. Look at look at all these useless paperwork we have to do just to get a lousy loan. People Emotionally disrupt marriage. The most emotional disrupt marriage I ever witnessed was a couple where the wife was a hardcore E who believed in job and financial security. The husband, on the other hand, finds finds fancied himself as a high-flying I. He thought he was future Warren Buffett, but in reality he was an S, a commission only salesman by profession. But he was a chronic gambler at heart. He was always looking for the investment that would help him get rich quick. He was all ears for any new stock offering or offshore investment scheme that promised ultra high return, or a real estate deal he could take an option on. This couple is still together, yet I really do not know why each drives the other nuts. One person thrives on risks, the other hates risks, different quadrant, different core values. If you are married or in a primary relationship, if you are married or in a primary relationship circle, the quadrants you generate the majority of your income from, and then circle the quadrant your spouse or partners generates income from. The reason I ask you to do this is because the discussion between partners is often difficult if one partner does not understand where the other is coming from. The battle between the rich and the educated. There is another unspoken battlefield I have noticed, and that is the difference in points of view between the educated and the rich. In my years of researching the difference between the different quadrants, I have often heard bankers, attorney, accountants, other like them grumble silently that they are the educated ones, and it's often the so called less educated person who makes the big bucks. This is why I label the battle between the educated and the rich, which is more often the difference between people on the left side of the quadrant and the people of the right side of the quadrant, or the ES versus the BI. It's not that people in the B and I quadrant are uneducated, because many are highly educated. It's just that many B and I were not academic, which kids in schools, and we are not trained in graduate schools like attorney, accountants, and MBAs were. For those of you who read my books, Rich Dad Poor Dad, you know it is about the struggle between the educated and the rich. The highly educated but poor dad took a great pride in the fact that he had done years of advanced studies in prestigious schools such as Stanford University and the University of Chicago. My rich dad was a man who dropped out of the school to run his family business when his father died, so he never finished high school, yet he acquired tremendous wealth as I grew older and seems to be more influenced by my rich but uneducated dad. My educated dad was occasionally defensive of his station in life. One day, when I was about 16 years of age, my educated dad blurted out, I have advanced degrees from prestigious schools. What does your friend dad have? I paused and replied quickly, money and free time. More than a mental change. As I started earlier, to find success in the B or I quadrant requires more than simple academic or technical knowledge. It often requires a change in core emotional thinking, feelings, beliefs, and attitude. Remember, the B do have. What the rich do is relatively simple. It's the it's the B that is different. The difference is found in their thoughts, the more specifically their internal dialogues with themselves. That is why my rich dad forbade me from saying, I can't afford it, I can't do that, play it safe, don't lose money. What if you fail and never recover? He forbade me from saying those words because he truly believed that words are some most if they are emotional based thoughts, they are powerful. The good news is that they can be changed with support of new friends, new ideas, a little time. People who are not able to control their fear of losing should never invest on their own. They are the best served by turning that job over professional and not interesting with them. As an interesting note, I have met many professional people who are fearless when investing other people money and able to make lot of money. But when it comes to investing or risking their own money, their fear of losing becomes too strong and their ultimate lose that emotions do the thinking rather than their logic. I have also met people who can invest their money and win constantly, but lose their calm when someone asks them to invest money for them. The making and losing of money is an emotional subject, so my rich dad gave me the secret of handling these emotions. Rich dad always said to be successful as an investor or business owner, you have to be emotionally neutral to winning and losing. Winning and losing are just part of the game. Quitting my secure job. My friend Mike had a system that belongs to him. His father had built it. I did not make that good fortune. I knew that someday I was going to have to leave the comfort and the security of the nest and begin to build my own. In 1978, I resigned from the full time secure job with Xerox and took the hard step forward with no safety net. The noise in my head was loud from my fear and doubt. I was nearly paralyzed with fear as I signed my letter of resignation, collected my last paycheck, and walked out the door. I had an orchestra of self damaging thoughts and feelings playing inside me. I was bad mouthing myself so loudly and with such conviction that I could not fear anything else. It's a good thing because so many of the people I work with have saying he will be back, he will never make it. The problem was I was saying the same thing to myself. Those emotional words of self doubt haunted me for years until my wife and I were successful in both the B and I quadrant. Today, I still hear those words, they just have less authority in the process of putting up with my own self doubt. I learned to create other words, words of personal encouragement, statements such as keep calm, think clearly, keep an open mind, keep going. Ask someone who has gone before you before before you for some guidance. Trust and keep the faith in a higher power wanting the best for you. I learned to create these words of encouragement internally even though there was a part of me that was frightened and afraid. I knew that I had little chance of success my first time out. Yet the positive human emotions such as trust, faith, encourage, and good friend move me from. I knew that I had to take risks. I knew that the risks led to mistakes and mistakes led to wisdom and knowledge, both of which I lack for me. Failures would have been to let fear win, so I was willing to move forward with little in guarantees. My rich dad had instilled in me the idea that failure is a part of the process of success. Internal journey. My journey from one quadrant to the next is an internal journey. It is a journey from one set of core beliefs and technical skills to a new set of core belief and a new set of technical skills. The process is much like learning to ride a bicycle. At first you fall down many times. Oftentimes it's frustrating and embarrassing, especially if your friends are watching, but after a while the falling stops and riding becomes automatic. If you fall down again, it's not the big of a deal, because internally you now know that you can get up and ride again. The process is the same when going from an emotional mindset of job security to the emotional mindset of the financial freedom. Once my wife and I made the crossing, we were less afraid of failing because we were confident in our ability to stand back up. There are two statements that kept me going personally. One was my rich dad words of advice when I was on the brink of quitting and turning back. You can always quit, so why quit now? That statement kept my spirit higher and emotions calms. That statement reminded me that I was highway across, so why turn back? Because the distance going home was just as far as going for the quadrant on the other side. It would be the like Columbus quieting and turning back halfway across the Atlantic. Either way, the distance was the same, and a word of caution. Intelligence is also knowing them to quite too often. I met people who are so stubborn they keep going forward on a project that has no chance of success. The problem of knowing when to quit or when to keep going is to an age old problem with anyone who takes risks. This problem One way to manage this problem is to keep going or quite is to find mentor who have already successful made the crossing before and seek their advice. Such a person who is already on the other side can best guide you, but the careful of advice from someone who has only read books about the crossing and gets paid to lecture on the subject. The other statement that often kept me going was giant often trip and fall, but worms don't, because all they do is dig and crawl. The main reason so many people struggle financially is to because they lack a good education or are not hardworking. It's because they are afraid of losing. It's the fear of losing stops them. They have already lost. Losers cut their winners and write their losers. For fear of being a loser affect what people do in strange ways. I've seen people who bought a stock $20 sell their shares when they reach $30 because they're so afraid of losing what they gain, only to have to stock go $100 split and go up to $100 gain. The same person have bought a stock of $20 will watch to go down to stay 3 and still hang on hoping the price will come back up, and they may hang on to that $3 stock for 20 years. This is the example of a person being of afraid of losing or adapting the loss that they wind up losing. Winners cut off their losers and write their winners. Winners do things almost exactly the opposite. Often, the moment they know they took a losing position, that is their stock price to go down instead of up. They will set immediately and take their losses. Most are not ashamed to stay. They look a lose for a winner, knows that losing is part of the process of winning. When they find a winner, they will ride it up as far as it can go. The moment they know the free ride is over and the prize has peak, they cut and sail. The key to being a great investor is to neutral of winning and losing. Then you don't have emotionally driving thoughts such as fear and greed doing your thinking for you. Losers do the same thing in life. People who are afraid of losing do the same thing in real life. We all know of. Number one, people who stay in marriages where there is no longer any love. Number two, people who stay at dead end jobs. Number three, people who hang on to old clothes and stuff they will never use. Number four, people who stay in towns where they have no future. Number five, people who stay friends with people who holds them back. Emotional intelligence can be controlled. Financial intelligence is closely linked to emotional intelligence. In my opinions, most people suffer financially because their emotions are in control of their thoughts. We are human being all have the same emotions. What determines the difference in what we do and what we have in life is primarily how we handle those emotions. For example, the emotions of fear can cause some of us to be coward. The same emotions of fear can cause other become courageous. Unfortunately, when it comes to the subject of money, most people in our society are conditioned to be financial coward. When the fear of losing money comes up, most people mind automatically start chanting these words. Number one, security rather than freedom. Number two, avoid risks rather than learn to manage risks. Number three, play it safe rather than play it smart. Number four, I can't afford it rather than how can I afford it. Number five, it's too expensive rather than what is worth long term. Number six, diversify rather than focus. Number seven, what will my friend think rather than what do I think. The wisdom of risks. There is a science to taking risks, especially financial risks. One of the best book I've read on the subject of money and risk management is Trading for a Living by Alexander Elder. Trading for a Living by Alexander Elder. Also, it was written for people who trade stocks and options professionally. By wisdom of risk and risk management applies to all areas of money and money management, personal psychology, and investing. One of the reason many successful bees are not always as successful as I is because they do not fully understand the psychology behind purely risking money. While B understand risks when it involves business system and people, that knowledge does not always translate into the system of money making money. It's emotional more than technical. In summary, moving from quadrant on the left to the quadrant on the right is more emotional than technical. If people are not able to control their emotion thoughts, I would not recommend the journey. The reason things look so risky on the right side of the quadrant to people on the left side is because the emotions of fear is often affecting their thinking. People on the left side play it safe is a logical thought. It isn't. It's an emotional thought, and it's the emotional thoughts that keep people stuck to one quadrant or the other. What people do on the right side of the equation is not that hard. I am sincere when I say that it is an easy as buying four greenhouses for low prices, waiting until the market improves, selling them, and then and then buying a big red hotel. Life really is a game of Monopoly for people on the right side of the quadrant. Sure, there's a winning and losing there, but that is a part of the game. Winning and losing is a part of the life. To be successful on the right side of the quadrant is to be a person who loves the game. Tiger Woods loses more than he wins, yet he still loves the game. Donald Trump went broke and battled back. He didn't quite because he lost. Losing only made him smarter and more determined. Many wealthy people went broke before they become rich. It's a part of the game. If a person emotions are thinking for them, these emotion thought often build that person from seeing anything else. It's because of those knee-jerk emotional thoughts that people react rather than think. It it is those emotions that cause people from different quadrant to argue. The argument are caused by people not having the same emotional point of the view. It is that emotional reaction that blinds a person from the seeing how easy and often fear things are on the right side of the quadrant. If a person cannot control this, their emotional thoughts, and many cannot, then they should not attempt to make the crossing. I encourage all of you wanting to make the crossing to make sure you have a long term positive support group with you and a mentor on the other side guiding you. To me, the struggle my wife and I went through was worth it. For us, the most important thing about crossing from the left side of the quadrant, right side of the quadrant is not what we had to do, but who we become in the process. To me, this is the priceless. Chapter 9, Part 2: Be the bank, not the banker. I have focused on the BE portion of the formula B do have, because without the proper mindset and attitude, you cannot be prepared for the great economic changes that are facing us today. By being someone with the skills and mindset of the right side of the quadrant, you will be prepared to recognize the opportunities that arise from these changes and be prepared to do what will result in your having financial success. I remember a phone calls I received from my rich dad in late 1986. Are you in the real estate market or stock market? He asks. Neither, I replied. Everything I have is invested in building my business. Good, he said. Stay out of all markets. Keep building your business. Something big is about to happen. That year, the US Congress passed the Tax Reform Act of 1986. In a swift 43 days, Congress took away many of the taxes loopholes that people counted on to shelter their income. For people who were using those passive losses from their income property as tax deduction, they suddenly still had their losses, but the government had taken away the tax deduction all across America. Real estate prices begins to plunge, property prices begins to slide. In some cases, as much as 90% of the suddenly property were worth far less than the amount of their mortgage. Panic swept the entire property market. Banks and savings and loans begins to shake. Money begins to fall. People could not get their money out of the bank. And then Wall Street crash in October 1987. The world went into financial crisis. Fundamentally, the Tax Reform Act of 1986 took away many of the tax loopholes that on the left side of the quadrant, high income E or S depends on. Many of them had invested in real estate properties or limited partnership in order to utilize these losses to upset their earnings from the E and the S quadrant. And while the cash and recession did affect the people on the right side of the quadrant B and the I quadrant, many of their tax avoidance mechanism were left in the intact. During this period, E learned a new word. That word was downsizing. They soon realized that when a major layoff was announced, the share price of the stock of the company announcing the layoff went up. Suddenly, most did not understand why there were many else who were also struggling to cope with the recession due to the decrease in business, higher insurance rates, as well as losses from the real estate and share market. As a result, I feel that individuals primarily focused in the left side of the quadrant were hurt and suffered the most financially as a direct result of the Tax Reform Act of 1986. Transfer of wealth. While people on the left side were suffering, many people who operate on the B and the I side of the quadrant were getting rich thanks to the government taking away from some people gives to other. By changing the tax code, all the tax tricks reasons for investing were taken away from the people who were simply buying real estate to lose money. Many were high income employees, professional people such as doctors, attorney, accountant, small business owners. Periods to this period, they had so much taxable income that their advisors told them to buy real estate to lose money, and then with any extra money invest in the stock market. When the government took that loopholes away with the Tax Reform Act, one of the most massive transfer of wealth began. In my opinion, much of the wealth was taken away from the E and the S side of the quadrant, handed to the B and the I side for pennies on the dollar. When the saving and loans, the organization that issued the bad loans failed, billions of dollars in deposit were at risk. The money had to be paid back. Who was left to pay back the billions of dollar loss in saving and real estate foreclosures? Well, the taxpayer, of course, the very people who were already hurting enough as it was, and the taxpayer were stuck with a multi-billion dollars bill for this tax law change. Some of you may also remember a government agency called the Resolution Trust Corporation, or the RTC, as it was commonly known as. The RTC was the agency responsible for taking the foreclosure from the real estate crash and transforming them to people who knew how to handle them. For me and many of my friends, it was like a blessing from financial heaven. Money, you will recall, is seen with the mind, not the eyes. During this period of time, emotions ran high and vision were blurred. People say that they were trained to see three things happens to the people on the left side of the quadrant. Number one, panic was everywhere. When emotions are high, financial intelligence often disappears because people were so concerned about their job, the falling value of their property, the crush of the stock market, and the general slowdown of business. They failed to see the massive opportunities right in front of them. Their emotional thoughts had blinded them. Instead of moving forward and beating the bushes, most people went into their caves and hide. Number two, they lack the technical skills required on the right side of the quadrant. Just as a doctor must have technical skills developed from years of the schooling and then from on-the-job training, someone in the B quadrant and the I quadrant must also possess highly specialized technical skills. Technical skills include financial literacy, which is known the vocabulary, how to restructure debt, how to structure an offering, who your how who who your market is, how to raise capital, and other learnable skills. When the RTC said we have a banker box for sale, and in the property that used to be worth 20 millions, but you can have it today for 4 million, most people on the left side of the quadrant did not have a clue how to raise 4 millions to buy the gift from financial haven, or know how to recognize the good deals from the bad deals. Number 3, they lack a cash money They lack a cash money. Most people during this period had to work harder just to survive by operating as a bee by business could expand with little physical efforts on my part. By 1990s, my business was up and running and growing. During this period, the business grew from a startup to 11 offices worldwide. The more it expanded, the less physical work I had to do, and the more money came in the system, and the people in the system were working hard. With the extra money and the free time, my wife and I were able to spend a lot of time looking at deals, and there were many of them.